Hello there, and welcome to Sleep Science, where we explore fascinating science in a quiet, relaxing way that helps your mind unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we begin tonight's tale, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. It's always lovely to know where these gentle expeditions are drifting off to. Tonight, we're following one of nature's most extraordinary transformations, how the mighty dinosaurs became the birds singing outside your window. It's a story that spans millions of years, filled with feathers that weren't meant for flying, tiny dinosaurs with wishbones, and a great extinction that changed everything. We'll wander from ancient forests where dinosaurs first sprouted plumes, to modern laboratories where scientists read the whispers of DNA, discovering that every robin and sparrow carries the ancient heartbeat of a T-Rex. So settle in, close your eyes if you like, and let's take a nice slow wander through deep time where reptiles learned to sing and the sky found its most graceful inhabitants. Picture a world that would terrify and astonish you in equal measure. A place where giants browsed on ferns the size of trees, where predators stalked on two legs with eyes like amber searchlights, and where the very air hummed with sounds no human ear has ever heard. For most of the 20th century, we imagined dinosaurs as sluggish, cold-blooded monsters. Lumbering reptiles with brains the size of walnuts, dragging their tails through prehistoric swamps like oversized, disgruntled lizards. Museums displayed them as static, dull-eyed creatures frozen in awkward poses, and movies portrayed them as mindless eating machines. But here's the thing about science: it loves to rewrite the story just when you think you've got it figured out. The real dinosaurs, as we understand them now, were nothing like those old museum dioramas. They were warm-blooded athletes, many of them, quick, intelligent, and surprisingly social. Some species lived in herds, cared for their young with the tenderness of devoted parents, and engaged in complex social behaviors that would make a soap opera writer jealous. They didn't drag their tails, they held them high for balance, like tightrope walkers navigating an ancient world. Take a moment, if you will, to imagine a different kind of dinosaur. Picture Triceratops moving through forests not as a plodding tank, but as a three-horned athlete, muscles rippling beneath skin that might have been brightly colored, maybe striped or spotted like modern animals. Their massive frills weren't just armor, they were likely display structures, billboards of social status painted in hues we can only guess at. When these creatures called to each other across the landscape, the sounds might have been deep, resonant calls that carried for miles, conversations in a language older than mountains. And then there were the small ones. Not every dinosaur was a giant. Some were no bigger than chickens, darting through undergrowth with the quick grace of modern birds. Compsognathus, for instance, was about the size of a house cat, but built for speed. These tiny dinosaurs had hollow bones, long legs, and keen eyes. They were the sprinters of the Mesozoic, living life in the fast lane while their massive cousins dominated the headlines. Even the fearsome predators were more complex than we first imagined. Velociraptors, despite what Hollywood might have you believe, were actually about the size of large turkeys, covered in feathers, and likely hunted in coordinated packs. They had curved claws, yes, but they also had relatively large brains and may have used tools. There's something both wonderful and unsettling about imagining a feathered, intelligent predator working with its pack to solve problems. Less monster, more tactical genius in a feather coat. The evidence for warm-bloodedness in dinosaurs comes from several quiet revelations. Their bone structure, for one thing, shows the rapid growth patterns we see in modern warm-blooded animals. Some dinosaur fossils preserve evidence of complex respiratory systems, with air sacs like those found in birds today. These systems are the hallmark of high-energy, active lifestyles. Cold-blooded creatures simply don't need such efficient breathing apparatus. And then there's the behavior. Fossil evidence shows us dinosaurs that migrated vast distances, suggesting endurance that cold-blooded reptiles simply can't maintain. We found dinosaur nests with carefully arranged eggs, some with evidence that parents brooded their young, maintaining precise temperatures like living incubators. There are even fossils of dinosaurs apparently sleeping in bird-like poses, with their heads tucked under their arms, suggesting they dreamed much the way modern birds do. Perhaps most remarkably, we now know that many dinosaurs were adorned with feathers. Not all of them, mind you, but a surprising number. These weren't necessarily flight feathers, but structures for display, insulation, and communication. Imagine a tyrannosaur chick covered in downy fluff, or a therizinosaurus with elaborate plumes cascading from its arms like some prehistoric fashion statement. The line between dinosaur and bird, it turns out, was never as clear as we once thought. Because here's where the story gets truly extraordinary. Birds didn't evolve from dinosaurs. Birds are dinosaurs. Not descendants, but actual, living, breathing members of the dinosaur family tree. Every robin singing outside your window, every pigeon strutting down a city street, every eagle soaring high above is as much a dinosaur as any Tyrannosaurus rex ever was. They're just dinosaurs that never gave up, dinosaurs that found a way to survive by growing wings and learning to fly. This revelation transforms everything about how we see both the ancient and modern worlds. When you watch a chicken scratch in the dirt, you're observing behavior that's been refined over 150 million years. When a hawk circles overhead, you're witnessing the same keen hunting instincts that once belonged to their much larger, earthbound cousins. The dinosaurs never really went extinct. They just got smaller, grew better feathers, and decided the sky was a nicer place to live than the ground. In doing so, they became one of the most successful groups of animals on Earth, with over 10 species painting the skies in colors and songs their ancient ancestors could never have imagined. So, as we begin this gentle journey through deep time, let's leave behind the old images of sluggish monsters and embrace the real dinosaurs, dynamic, diverse, intelligent creatures whose legacy soars above us every day. They were the ancestors of flight, the inventors of song, and the original masters of reinvention. Not bad for a group that supposedly went extinct 66 million years ago. In the grand family album of dinosaurs, there's one particular branch that would go on to inherit the Earth, though they had no way of knowing it at the time. They were called theropods, which means beast feet, though that name hardly does them justice. These were the bipedal dinosaurs, the ones who walked tall on 2 legs while most of their cousins preferred the stability of 4. Picture them as the dancers of the dinosaur world, balanced and graceful, moving through ancient landscapes with a confidence that suggested they owned the place. And in many ways, they did. What made theropods special wasn't just their posture, though that 2-legged stance was revolutionary in its own right. It was a collection of features that, when you line them up, start to tell a story that leads directly to your backyard bird feeder. Hollow bones, for starters. Most dinosaurs had solid, heavy bones like modern crocodiles or elephants. But theropods developed something different. Bones filled with air spaces, like nature's own engineering solution for weight reduction. It's the same trick that modern birds use to stay airborne, and it appeared long before anyone was thinking about flight. Then there were their feet. 3 main toes pointing forward, with that distinctive middle toe being the longest. If you've ever looked closely at a chicken's foot, you've seen this exact arrangement. It's a design that's been working beautifully for over 200 million years, which says something about getting things right the first time. These feet were built for speed and agility, not the plodding gait of their four-legged relatives. But perhaps most telling of all was a bone that most people have never heard of, the furcula. You might know it by its common name, the wishbone. Every time you've pulled apart a turkey's wishbone at dinner, you've been handling a piece of anatomy that connects modern birds directly to their ancient theropod ancestors. This V-shaped bone, formed by the fusion of two collarbones, was once thought to be unique to birds. Then paleontologists started finding it in theropod fossils, and suddenly the family connection became impossible to ignore. Let's take a gentle wander through this family tree, shall we? At one end, you have the giants: Tyrannosaurus rex, Allosaurus, Giganotosaurus. These were the celebrities of the theropod world, the ones with the intimidating names and the impressive teeth. T-Rex, despite its fearsome reputation, had some surprisingly bird-like qualities. Its arms, famously small for its body size, were positioned and moved in ways that mirror how birds hold their wings. Its vision was exceptional, possibly better than a hawk's. And recent evidence suggests it may have been covered in primitive feathers, at least as a juvenile. Imagine a baby T-Rex as a fluffy, oversized chick with teeth, terrifying and adorable in equal measure. But the real stars of our story are the smaller theropods, the ones who were already experimenting with features that would eventually take to the skies. Compsognathus, no bigger than a modern chicken, had long legs built for running and a lightweight skull filled with sharp teeth. Coelophysis traveled in packs and may have engaged in complex social behaviors. These weren't just scaled-down versions of their giant cousins, they were innovations in their own right, exploring what it meant to be small, fast, and clever in a world dominated by much larger creatures. As we move closer to the modern era, the theropod family tree gets particularly interesting. Enter the dromaeosaurs, the running lizards, which included Velociraptor and its relatives. These creatures had already developed many features we now associate with birds: feathers for display and insulation, hollow bones, complex social behaviors, and that distinctive sickle-shaped claw that they may have used for climbing as much as hunting. They represent a fascinating middle ground between what we think of as dinosaurs and what we recognize as birds. The truly remarkable thing about studying theropod evolution is watching how bird-like features accumulated gradually over time. It wasn't as if one day a dinosaur suddenly sprouted wings and decided to fly. Instead, each adaptation served its own purpose in its own time. Hollow bones made creatures lighter and more agile on the ground. Feathers provided insulation and visual communication. Wishbones helped stabilize the torso during rapid movement. Flight-capable wings were almost an accident, a happy coincidence of features that had evolved for entirely different reasons. There's something deeply satisfying about this gradual accumulation of traits, like watching a slow-motion magic trick where the final reveal has been building for millions of years. Each theropod species was perfectly adapted to its own environment and lifestyle, unaware that it was also participating in a much larger story. The Allosaurus stalking prey in the late Jurassic had no idea that some of its distant cousins would eventually inherit the sky. Modern molecular biology has confirmed what paleontologists suspected. The theropod family tree is more like a family bush, with numerous branches leading to various experiments in being a bipedal predator. Some led to dead ends, evolutionary cul-de-sacs that produced magnificent creatures like Carnotaurus with its devil horn skull, or Therizinosaurus with its massive claws designed for stripping vegetation rather than hunting prey. Others led to smaller, more adaptable forms that would eventually discover flight. What's particularly beautiful about the theropod story is how it demonstrates that evolution doesn't have a destination in mind. There was no grand plan to create birds, no evolutionary pressure specifically driving toward flight. Instead, each adaptation was a response to immediate environmental pressures and opportunities. Better insulation, improved agility, more efficient bone structure, enhanced social communication, these were all valuable traits in their own right. That they eventually combined to produce flight was, in many ways, a wonderful accident. And yet, looking back across deep time, the progression seems almost inevitable. Once you see the pattern, the gradual hollowing of bones, the development of feathers, the refinement of balance and coordination, it becomes hard to imagine any other outcome. The theropods were, in a very real sense, practicing to be birds long before flight was even possible. So when you see a bird today, remember that you're looking at the culmination of one of evolution's most successful experiments. Every flight feather, every hollow bone, every three-toed foot carries the legacy of countless theropod generations, each contributing their own innovations to a story that began in the Triassic and continues every time a sparrow takes wing. It's a family tree that reaches from the deepest past to the highest clouds, and every branch tells a story of adaptation, survival, and the endless creativity of life finding new ways to thrive. Life, it turns out, is surprisingly creative about staying warm, and feathers may have been nature's most elegant solution to a very practical problem. Long before any dinosaur dreamed of flight, long before wings were even a possibility, something remarkable was happening to their skin. In the quiet corners of ancient forests, small theropods were sprouting the first primitive feathers, though they bore little resemblance to the sleek flight feathers we see today. These early experiments in plumage were more like fuzzy down, simple filaments that served a purpose far more basic than soaring through ancient skies. They were trying to stay warm. Imagine, if you will, a small dinosaur about the size of a robin, covered not in scales, but in a coat of fluffy filaments, each one no more complex than a hair. This isn't science fiction. This is Sinosauropteryx, discovered in China in the 1990s, and it changed everything we thought we knew about dinosaur skin. When paleontologists first examined this exquisitely preserved fossil, they found something that made them blink hard and look again, evidence of simple, hair-like structures covering the animal's body. Not scales, not bare skin, but something entirely new in the dinosaur world. Feathers, it seems, began as an answer to a very dinosaurian problem. Many theropods were becoming smaller, which is generally a good strategy for survival, but it comes with a significant drawback. Small animals lose heat much more quickly than large ones. It's simple physics, really. A tiny creature has a lot of surface area relative to its body volume, which means heat escapes faster than a large animal can produce it. For a warm-blooded dinosaur, this was a serious challenge. Scales, the traditional dinosaur covering, are excellent for protection and preventing water loss, but they're rather poor at insulation. So, evolution, in its wonderfully pragmatic way, began experimenting with something new. The first feathers were probably no more than simple tubes of keratin, the same protein that makes up your hair and fingernails. Think of them as hollow hairs, each one capable of trapping a thin layer of air against the skin. Air, as any winter coat designer will tell you, is an excellent insulator when you can keep it still. These primitive feathers created tiny pockets of warm air, turning the dinosaur's body into its own personal heating system. But life rarely stops at good enough. Once the basic feather structure was established, evolution began to elaborate on the theme. Some species developed branched filaments, with side projections that increased the surface area and improved insulation. Others experimented with different lengths and densities. It was like nature's own fashion show, except the models were small dinosaurs and the theme was staying warm while looking fabulous. And fabulous they may well have been. Recent research suggests that many feathered dinosaurs were quite colorful. Scientists can now examine fossilized feathers under powerful microscopes and identify structures called melanosomes, tiny organelles that once contained pigments. By comparing these structures to those found in modern bird feathers, researchers can make educated guesses about dinosaur coloration. Some species appear to have been iridescent, with feathers that shimmered green and blue like a modern magpie. Others were russet brown or striped in patterns that would have made them blend seamlessly into dappled forest light. This brings us to the second major function of early feathers: display. Once you have structures growing from your skin, it's only a small evolutionary step to use them for communication. Male peacocks don't spread their tails to stay warm, they do it to impress potential mates and intimidate rivals. The same principle likely applied to feathered dinosaurs. Those early plumes may have served as biological billboards, advertising health, genetic quality, and social status to anyone who cared to look. Consider Epidixipteryx, a small theropod with 4 extremely long feathers extending from its tail. These structures were far too delicate and cumbersome to be useful for insulation or any practical purpose. They were pure ornamentation, like biological party streamers designed to catch attention. When this little dinosaur wanted to make an impression, it literally let its tail do the talking. The variety of early feather types is quite astonishing. Paleontologists have identified at least 5 different categories of primitive feathers, ranging from simple filaments to complex branched structures. Some dinosaurs had what's called pennaceous feathers, with a central shaft and branches that could zip together to form a smooth surface, much like modern flight feathers but without the flight. Others sported plumulaceous feathers, fluffy and loose like the down you might find in a sleeping bag. One of the most spectacular examples comes from Anchiornis, a small theropod that lived about 160 million years ago. This creature was covered head to toe in black feathers, with distinctive white markings on its wings and a prominent crest of long feathers on its head. It looked rather like a goth penguin with delusions of grandeur, and it probably couldn't fly a lick, but it was undoubtedly warm, and it almost certainly turned heads wherever it went. The preservation of these ancient feathers is itself something of a miracle. Feathers are delicate structures made of the same protein as hair, and they typically decompose long before they can fossilize. But in certain environments, particularly the fine-grained sediments of ancient lakes, conditions were just right for these fragile structures to be preserved. The result is a window into an ancient world where dinosaurs were far more colorful and complex than we ever imagined. Perhaps, most remarkably, feathers appear to have evolved independently in several different dinosaur lineages. It wasn't a one-time innovation that spread through the family tree. It was such a good idea that evolution invented it repeatedly. This suggests that the advantages of feathers, whether for insulation, display, camouflage, or eventually flight, were so significant that natural selection kept pushing in the same direction. Of course, not all dinosaurs developed feathers. The giants like Brontosaurus and Triceratops probably relied on their sheer mass for temperature regulation and had little need for fluffy coats. But among the smaller theropods, feathers became increasingly common, setting the stage for the next great innovation: flight. It's worth pausing to marvel at the ingenuity of this solution. Feathers are among the most complex structures ever evolved by any animal. Each one is a masterpiece of engineering, with a central shaft supporting hundreds of parallel branches, each of which supports hundreds of smaller branches, all held together by tiny hooks that allow the feather to zip and unzip like a biological Velcro. And it all began with the simple need to stay warm on a cool dinosaur morning. So the next time you see a bird preening its feathers, remember that you're watching the culmination of an experiment that began over 150 million years ago. Those sleek flight feathers, those fluffy down patches, that iridescent shimmer in the sunlight, they're all descendants of those first simple filaments that helped small dinosaurs stay cozy in ancient forests. Feathers weren't invented for flight. Flight was invented for feathers. And in that distinction lies one of evolution's most beautiful surprises. Sometimes the most revolutionary innovations begin with the most ordinary needs. In 1861, workers in a Bavarian limestone quarry uncovered something that would scramble the neat categories scientists thought they understood: a creature with the teeth of a reptile, the wings of a bird, and the attitude of something caught between two worlds. They called it Archaeopteryx, meaning ancient wing, and it arrived at precisely the right moment to cause maximum scientific chaos. Charles Darwin had just published On the Origin of Species 2 years earlier, and critics were demanding to see the transitional fossils that his theory predicted. Where, they asked, were the missing links that would prove one type of animal could evolve into another? Archaeopteryx was evolution's answer to that challenge, delivered with perfect timing and preserved in exquisite detail. Picture this remarkable creature, about the size of a modern crow, with feathers clearly visible in the limestone that entombed it 150 million years ago. But look closer, and the details become wonderfully confusing. Those wings end in clawed fingers, 3 of them, like tiny dinosaur hands equipped for flight. The skull has a beak, yes, but that beak is filled with sharp teeth, dozens of them. The tail is long and bony, quite unlike the short, stubby affairs that modern birds sport. It's as if someone took a small dinosaur and a bird, put them in a cosmic blender, and produced something that was unmistakably both and definitively neither. When scientists first examined Archaeopteryx, they weren't quite sure what to make of it. Some argued it was simply a bird with some primitive features. Others insisted it was a dinosaur that happened to have feathers. The debate raged for decades, but as more fossils were discovered and our understanding of dinosaur anatomy improved, the truth became clear. Archaeopteryx wasn't a missing link in the traditional sense. It was something far more interesting, a snapshot of evolution in action, a creature that lived right at the moment when dinosaurs were becoming birds. The limestone quarries of Bavaria, where Archaeopteryx was found, preserve fossils with almost miraculous clarity. The sediment was so fine-grained that it captured not just bones but feathers, soft tissues, and tiny details that usually vanish without a trace. Looking at an Archaeopteryx fossil is like peering through a window into the late Jurassic period, seeing exactly how these ancient creatures were put together. And what a marvelous construction it was. Archaeopteryx had flight feathers that were virtually identical to those of modern birds, asymmetrical, with a strong central shaft and interlocking branches that could create the smooth airfoil surface necessary for powered flight. Yet its skeleton was pure dinosaur, a long bony tail, teeth in both jaws, and those distinctive clawed fingers extending from its wings. It could almost certainly fly, though perhaps not with the grace and efficiency of modern birds. Think of it as evolution's first attempt at powered flight, functional, but still working out the finer details. But Archaeopteryx, remarkable as it is, was just the beginning of the story. In the decades since its discovery, paleontologists have uncovered a treasure trove of transitional fossils that fill in the gaps between dinosaurs and birds. Each new discovery has added another piece to the puzzle until the line between dinosaur and bird has become so blurred as to be almost meaningless. Take Microraptor, discovered in China in the early 2000s. This crow-sized dinosaur lived about 120 million years ago and had not just one pair of wings, but two. Long flight feathers extended from both its arms and its legs, creating a four-winged arrangement that looked like something from a fever dream. Recent studies suggest it was probably black with an iridescent sheen, like a flying jewel gliding through ancient forests. It couldn't achieve powered flight like modern birds, but it was an accomplished glider, leaping from tree to tree with its four wings spread wide. Then there's Anchiornis, which we met briefly in our discussion of feathers. This little dinosaur was covered in black and white plumage and had long flight feathers on its arms and legs, though its wings were probably too small for effective flight. It represents an even earlier experiment in the direction of flight, a creature that had all the equipment for soaring, but perhaps not quite the aerodynamic refinement to use it effectively. Confuciusornis, from the early Cretaceous period, shows us another approach to the bird body plan. Unlike Archaeopteryx, it had lost its teeth and developed a proper beak. But it retained clawed fingers on its wings and a skeleton that was still quite dinosaur-like. Some specimens preserve long, ribbon-like tail feathers that were probably used for display, making this ancient bird look rather like a flying streamer in the prehistoric sky. What's fascinating about these transitional fossils is how they demonstrate that evolution rarely follows a straight line. There wasn't a single path from dinosaur to bird, but rather multiple experiments in how to be a flying dinosaur. Some developed elaborate four-wing arrangements. Others kept their teeth longer than necessary. Still, others experimented with different flight styles, from gliding to flapping to something in between. Yi Qi, discovered in 2015, represents perhaps the most surprising experiment of all. This small dinosaur had developed a completely different approach to flight. Bat-like wings made of skin stretched between elongated fingers, combined with bird-like feathers. It's as if evolution was trying out every possible solution to the problem of flight, just to see what worked best. Yi Qi's approach, while innovative, appears to have been a dead end, but what a glorious dead end it was. Each of these creatures tells us something important about how evolution works. There's no grand plan, no predetermined path from A to B. Instead, there are countless small experiments, most of which fail, but some of which succeed spectacularly. The transition from dinosaur to bird wasn't a single dramatic leap, but a gradual accumulation of useful traits: better feathers, longer arms, hollow bones, improved balance, more efficient metabolism. Perhaps most remarkably, many of these transitional forms weren't transitional at all in their own time. They were perfectly adapted to their own environments and lifestyles. Microraptor was an excellent glider. Confuciusornis was a successful early bird. They weren't incomplete or primitive, they were complete creatures making their own way in the world, unaware that paleontologists millions of years in the future would use them to understand the greatest transition in vertebrate evolution. The abundance of these fossils has also taught us that the dinosaur-to-bird transition happened not once but many times, in parallel lineages that all discovered similar solutions to similar problems. Flight, it seems, was such an advantageous ability that evolution kept reinventing it, trying different approaches until it found the ones that worked best. Modern birds are the descendants of just one of these experimental lineages, the one that happened to survive the Great Extinction 66 million years ago. But for a brief, shining moment in the Mesozoic era, the skies were filled with a wonderful variety of flying dinosaurs, each representing a different answer to the question of how to leave the ground behind. So, when you see a fossil of Archaeopteryx in a museum, remember that you're looking at more than just an ancient curiosity. You're seeing evidence of one of life's greatest achievements, the moment when earthbound creatures first learned to fly. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't efficient, and it certainly wasn't the only way to solve the problem. But it worked, and in working, it opened up an entirely new way of being alive. Flight, as any pilot will tell you, is really just a controlled fall with style, and evolution had to learn this lesson from scratch, probably more than once. The question of how dinosaurs first took to the air has puzzled scientists for decades, and like many of the best scientific mysteries, it has spawned competing theories, heated debates, and the occasional dramatic reenactment involving graduate students and makeshift wings. The central mystery is this: how do you get from running around on the ground to soaring through the sky? What were the intermediate steps, and why would they have been advantageous enough for natural selection to preserve them? There are two main schools of thought, each with its own compelling logic and devoted supporters. The first is called the ground-up hypothesis, and it suggests that flight evolved from running dinosaurs who gradually learned to use their feathered arms for extra speed and lift. Picture a small theropod sprinting across open ground, perhaps chasing prey or fleeing from a predator. Its arms, already equipped with primitive feathers, begin to beat in rhythm with its running, providing just a bit of extra lift and stability. Over time, those arm movements become more refined, the feathers more sophisticated, until eventually the dinosaur spends more time in the air than on the ground. The competing theory is the trees-down hypothesis, which proposes that flight evolved from gliding dinosaurs who lived in trees and gradually developed better and better ways to control their descent from branch to branch. Imagine Microraptor, with its 4 wings spread wide, leaping from tree to tree in ancient forests. Each generation that could glide a little farther, land a little more accurately, or maneuver a little more precisely would have had an advantage. Eventually, some of these gliders developed the ability to not just fall gracefully, but to actually generate lift and achieve powered flight. Both theories have merit, and both are supported by different pieces of evidence. The ground-up hypothesis explains why so many bird-like features appear in fast-running theropods. The trees-down hypothesis explains why early flying dinosaurs like Microraptor had such elaborate wing arrangements and why gliding is often a stepping stone to powered flight in modern animals. But here's where the story gets beautifully complicated. Evolution probably didn't choose just one path. Recent research suggests that different lineages of dinosaurs may have invented flight in different ways, and some may have used both approaches at different stages in their development. Young birds today often use their wings for running up steep inclines long before they can fly, a behavior that mirrors what the ground-up hypothesis predicts. Meanwhile, many modern birds are excellent gliders, and some use gliding as their primary means of locomotion. The mechanics of developing flight are staggeringly complex, which makes evolution's success at solving this problem all the more remarkable. Flight requires an intricate coordination of anatomy, physiology, and behavior that would challenge the most sophisticated engineering team. Wings must be the right shape, size, and strength. Muscles must be powerful enough to beat those wings rapidly and precisely. The respiratory system must be efficient enough to supply the enormous amounts of oxygen that powered flight demands. Balance and coordination must be refined to an extraordinary degree. Consider just the wings themselves. A flight feather is a marvel of biological engineering, with hundreds of parallel branches called barbs, each supporting hundreds of smaller branches called barbules, all held together by tiny hooks that allow the feather to zip and unzip like biological Velcro. These feathers must be arranged in precise patterns to create the airfoil shape that generates lift. Too few feathers and you can't get off the ground. Too many and you're too heavy to stay airborne. Then there's the matter of flight muscles. Modern birds dedicate anywhere from 15 to 30% of their body weight to the muscles that power flight. These aren't just any muscles, but specialized fibers that can contract and relax at incredible speeds while generating enormous amounts of force. The evolution of these muscles required changes not just in muscle fiber type, but in the bones they attach to, the blood vessels that supply them, and the nervous system that controls them. The skeleton had to be completely reimagined as well. Solid bones were replaced with hollow ones, reducing weight while maintaining strength. The breastbone developed a large keel to anchor the flight muscles. The shoulder joint became more flexible to allow the complex wing movements that flight requires. Even the tail had to be redesigned, shortened, and simplified to reduce, drag, and improve maneuverability. Perhaps, most remarkably, the entire metabolic system had to be overhauled. Flight is energetically expensive. It requires about 10 to 15 times more energy than walking at a comparable speed. This meant developing more efficient hearts, more effective respiratory systems, and faster metabolisms. Modern birds have some of the most efficient respiratory systems in the animal kingdom, with a complex arrangement of air sacs that allows for continuous airflow through the lungs. This system is so effective that birds can fly at altitudes where mammals would quickly lose consciousness from lack of oxygen. All of these changes had to evolve together in coordination over millions of years. Any one innovation without the others would have been useless or even harmful. It's like trying to invent the airplane, the engine, the navigation system, and the pilot training program all at the same time, with each generation making only tiny improvements. And yet, somehow, evolution managed it. Not just once, but multiple times. Bats developed flight independently using skin membranes instead of feathers. Insects conquered the air using entirely different wing structures and flight mechanics. Each time, evolution found a different solution to the same basic problem: how to overcome gravity and control movement in 3 dimensions. The transition to flight also required behavioral innovations that are easy to overlook: learning to judge distances accurately, understanding air currents and thermals, developing landing techniques that don't result in catastrophic crashes. All of these skills had to be refined through countless generations of trial and error. Modern birds make flight look effortless, but behind that apparent ease lies millions of years of evolutionary refinement. There's something almost poetic about the fact that the dinosaurs who eventually mastered flight were among the smallest members of their family tree. While their giant cousins dominated the landscape through sheer size and strength, these little dinosaurs found a different path to success. They learned to leave the ground behind entirely. In doing so, they discovered not just a new way to move, but a new way to see the world. From the air, the familiar landscape becomes a map of possibilities. Distant food sources become visible. Predators can be spotted from safe distances. seasonal migrations become possible, allowing birds to follow favorable weather and abundant resources across vast distances. Flight didn't just change how dinosaurs moved, it changed how they lived, where they could go, and what they could become. The development of flight represents one of evolution's greatest achievements, right up there with the development of eyes, the invention of photosynthesis, and the emergence of complex multicellular life. It's a reminder that, given enough time and the right pressures, life can solve problems that seem impossible and develop capabilities that transform the very nature of existence. So, the next time you watch a bird take off from your windowsill, remember that you're witnessing the culmination of one of the most complex engineering projects in the history of life on Earth. Those wings beating in precise rhythm, that effortless lift into the sky, it all began with small dinosaurs who decided that the ground wasn't quite enough and that the sky might hold better possibilities. They were right, of course, and their descendants are still proving it every time they take wing. 66 million years ago, the Earth had what you might call a very bad day, the kind that ends with most of the planet's large animals becoming fossils and a few small, feathered survivors inheriting a dramatically emptier world. It started with a rock, not just any rock, mind you, but a space rock roughly 6 miles across, traveling at about 45,000 miles per hour, carrying the energy of several billion nuclear weapons. When it slammed into what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, it didn't just make a crater, it reshaped the entire planet. The impact was so violent that it sent shockwaves around the globe, triggered massive earthquakes, and hurled billions of tons of rock and dust into the atmosphere. Within hours, the sky began to darken. Debris from the impact, some of it traveling fast enough to escape Earth's gravity entirely before falling back down as glowing meteors, heated the atmosphere to oven-like temperatures. Forests across the globe burst into flames. The air itself became hot enough to kill any large animal caught in the open. It was, quite literally, a very bad day to be a dinosaur. But the immediate destruction was just the beginning. As dust and debris filled the atmosphere, they blocked out the sun for months, possibly years. Temperatures plummeted. Photosynthesis ground to a halt as plants struggled to survive in perpetual twilight. Food webs collapsed from the bottom up. It was like someone had turned off the lights on the entire planet and forgotten where they put the switch. In this hellscape, most of the dinosaurs that had ruled the Earth for over 160 million years simply vanished. The mighty Tyrannosaurus rex, the long-necked sauropods, the armored ankylosaurs, all gone. The age of giant reptiles ended not with a whimper, but with one of the most catastrophic events in Earth's history. And yet, somehow, some dinosaurs survived. Not the big ones, not the famous ones, but small feathered creatures that had learned a very useful skill. They could fly. Flight, it turned out, was the perfect survival strategy for a post-apocalyptic world. When your local ecosystem has been obliterated, the ability to travel hundreds or thousands of miles to find food and suitable habitat becomes invaluable. While their earthbound cousins were trapped in devastated landscapes, early birds could simply fly away from the worst of the destruction, searching for patches of surviving vegetation or bodies of water that might still harbor edible creatures. Size mattered too, but not in the way you might expect. Throughout most of dinosaur history, being large was generally advantageous. Big animals are harder for predators to kill, better at regulating their body temperature, and can often access food sources that smaller animals can't reach. But in a world where food has suddenly become scarce, being small is a tremendous advantage. A bird weighing a few ounces needs far less food to survive than a dinosaur weighing several tons. When every calorie counts, efficiency becomes more important than power. The survivors also had another crucial advantage: dietary flexibility. Many of the early birds that made it through the extinction were omnivores or seed-eaters, creatures that could make a living from whatever happened to be available. Seeds, in particular, proved to be an excellent survival food. They're nutritious, they store well, and they tend to survive environmental disasters better than fresh vegetation. Many plants respond to catastrophe by producing enormous numbers of seeds before dying, essentially creating a natural emergency food supply. In contrast, many of the dinosaurs that went extinct were specialists. The giant sauropods were specialized for eating vast quantities of vegetation that simply wasn't available anymore. Large predators like T. rex depended on a steady supply of large prey animals, prey that had also gone extinct. When your entire lifestyle depends on a specific type of environment or food source, you're particularly vulnerable when that environment suddenly changes. The survivors also benefited from having already solved some of the basic problems of living in a harsh world. Feathers, originally evolved for insulation, proved invaluable for surviving the sudden climate change that followed the impact. Flight allowed for rapid dispersal to new habitats. Small size meant lower energy requirements. Many early birds were already adapted for living in marginal environments, scavenging and making do with whatever food they could find. But perhaps most importantly, the surviving birds were generalists in a world that suddenly had no use for specialists. They could eat seeds, insects, small animals, carrion, whatever happened to be available. They could nest in trees, on cliffs, or on the ground. They could live alone or in flocks, migrate or stay put, depending on what the circumstances required. This flexibility, which might have been only moderately useful in the stable ecosystems of the late Cretaceous, became absolutely critical in the chaotic aftermath of the extinction. The recovery wasn't immediate. It took millions of years for ecosystems to fully rebuild and for the surviving bird lineages to diversify into the thousands of species we see today. But the foundation for that recovery was laid by the small, adaptable creatures that managed to fly through the apocalypse and emerge on the other side. In many ways, the extinction event that ended the age of dinosaurs was also the beginning of the age of birds. With their giant cousins gone, the surviving avian dinosaurs found themselves in a world full of empty ecological niches waiting to be filled. Some evolved to become flightless again, growing large to take advantage of the lack of big predators. Others specialized for life in forests, grasslands, wetlands, and eventually every habitat on Earth. The irony is delicious, really. The very features that made early birds seem small and insignificant compared to their giant cousins, their modest size, their dietary flexibility, their ability to fly away from trouble, turned out to be exactly the qualities needed to survive one of the greatest catastrophes in Earth's history. It's a reminder that evolution doesn't necessarily favor the biggest, strongest, or most impressive creatures. Sometimes it favors the most adaptable, the most resourceful, the ones willing to try new approaches and explore new possibilities. The meek, in this case, quite literally, inherited the earth. So when you see a bird today, remember that you're looking at a member of the only surviving dinosaur lineage. Every robin, every eagle, every tiny hummingbird is a descendant of the small, feathered creatures that somehow managed to fly through the end of the world and live to tell the tale. They carry in their genes the story of the greatest survival story ever told, a reminder that sometimes the most important thing isn't being the biggest or the strongest, but simply being able to adapt when everything around you changes. The age of giant dinosaurs ended with fire and darkness, but the age of dinosaurs itself never ended at all. It just learned to sing and fly and find beauty in a world that had given them every reason to give up. In surviving, they proved that life's greatest strength isn't its ability to dominate, but its ability to endure, adapt, and ultimately thrive in ways that no one could have predicted. The next time you watch a chicken scratch in the dirt or see a hawk circle overhead, you're witnessing something quite extraordinary. Dinosaurs, still here, still thriving, having simply traded scales for feathers and roars for songs. This isn't poetic metaphor or scientific whimsy. Birds are dinosaurs, as literally and precisely as whales are mammals or roses are flowers. They're not descendants of dinosaurs, not relatives of dinosaurs, but actual, honest-to-goodness dinosaurs that happen to have survived 66 million years of evolutionary fine-tuning. When a paleontologist looks at a sparrow, they see a small theropod with highly specialized flight adaptations. When they examine a penguin, they see a flightless dinosaur that has returned to an aquatic lifestyle. It's all a matter of perspective, and the perspective of science is wonderfully clear on this point. The evidence is everywhere, once you know how to look for it. Take that chicken in your backyard, innocently pecking at seeds and looking about as far from fierce as any creature can manage. Watch how it moves, and you'll see the unmistakable gait of a bipedal theropod. Those feet, with 3 forward-pointing toes and 1 rear-facing thumb, are built on exactly the same pattern as a velociraptor's. When the chicken runs, it holds its body horizontal and uses its tail for balance, just like the small predatory dinosaurs that stalked through Jurassic forests. And those seemingly innocent behaviors? They're echoes of a much more dramatic past. When chickens scratch at the ground with their feet, they're using the same technique that their theropod ancestors used to uncover food and clear away debris. When a rooster puffs up his feathers and struts aggressively to establish dominance, he's engaging in display behaviors that would have been perfectly familiar to a Carnotaurus or Allosaurus. The gestures are smaller, the stakes are lower, but the underlying patterns are ancient. Birds have retained many of the anatomical features that defined their dinosaur ancestors. Their skeletons, stripped of feathers and flesh, are remarkably similar to those of small theropods. The hollow bones, the fused collarbones forming a wishbone, the arrangement of the hips and legs, it's all there, modified for flight but still recognizably dinosaurian. Even their skulls, despite being specialized for different diets and lifestyles, maintain the basic theropod architecture. But perhaps most fascinating are the behaviors that seem to have been passed down through genetic memory across millions of years. Many birds build elaborate nests, and recent fossil discoveries show that some dinosaurs did too. Triceratops and other horned dinosaurs may have engaged in head-butting contests, not unlike the sparring matches that modern sheep and goats enjoy. Some dinosaurs appear to have been highly social, living in herds and caring for their young communally, behaviors we see in everything from flamingos to geese. Parental care, in particular, seems to be a deeply dinosaurian trait. We've found fossils of dinosaurs sitting on their nests in the same protective posture that modern birds adopt when brooding their eggs. Some dinosaur species appear to have fed their young, bringing food back to the nest just as robins and wrens do today. The intense devotion that bird parents show to their offspring, the willingness to fight much larger predators to protect their young, the complex feeding behaviors, all of this has roots that reach back to the Mesozoic era. Even more remarkably, modern birds have retained some surprising anatomical throwbacks to their dinosaur heritage. Most birds still have claws on their wings, though they're usually hidden beneath the feathers. Young hoatzins, a South American bird, actually use these wing claws to climb through trees before their flight feathers are fully developed, giving us a glimpse of what early bird behavior might have looked like. Some birds, when threatened, will rear up on their hind legs and slash with their feet, a defensive strategy that would have made perfect sense for a small theropod. The respiratory system of birds is perhaps the most dinosaurian feature of all. That complex arrangement of air sacs and hollow bones isn't just an adaptation for flight, it's an inheritance from their theropod ancestors. Fossils show that many dinosaurs had similar respiratory systems, designed for the high-energy lifestyle of warm-blooded, active predators. When a bird breathes, air flows through its lungs in one direction, allowing for maximum oxygen extraction. It's an incredibly efficient system, and it's been working for over 150 million years. Studies of bird development have revealed even more dinosaur connections. Bird embryos go through stages where they look remarkably like their extinct relatives. Early in development, bird embryos have long, bony tails that are later absorbed and shortened. They develop teeth that are usually reabsorbed before hatching, though some species retain these tiny tooth-like structures throughout their lives. Their hands show the clear three-finger pattern of theropod dinosaurs before fusing into the wing bones we see in adult birds. Perhaps most tellingly, scientists have been able to activate dormant genetic programs in chicken embryos to produce features that are more overtly dinosaurian. By manipulating certain genes, researchers have created chicken embryos with teeth, long tails, and other ancestral features. These experiments don't create living dinosaurs, but they do demonstrate that the genetic toolkit for building dinosaurs is still there, hidden away in the DNA of modern birds. This connection goes both ways. Studying modern birds has revolutionized our understanding of extinct dinosaurs. When paleontologists want to understand how Tyrannosaurus rex might have moved, they study the biomechanics of ostriches and emus. When they're trying to figure out what colors Sinosauropteryx might have been, they examine the microscopic structure of feathers from modern birds. Birds are living laboratories for understanding dinosaur behavior, physiology, and ecology. The diversity of modern birds also gives us a sense of what the dinosaur world might have been like in terms of variety and ecological roles. Today's 10 bird species fill every conceivable niche: predators and scavengers, seed-eaters and nectar feeders, swimmers and climbers, migrants and homebodies. The range of sizes alone is staggering, from tiny bee hummingbirds weighing less than a penny to ostriches that can outrun most mammals. This diversity hints at what the full spectrum of dinosaur life might have looked like, most of which we'll never know because the fossil record preserves only a tiny fraction of the species that actually lived. In many ways, birds represent the ultimate success story of dinosaur evolution. They've colonized every continent, including Antarctica. They've mastered every major habitat on Earth. They've evolved to eat everything from tiny insects to large fish to flower nectar to carrion. They migrate across entire continents, navigate by the stars, and can live for decades. They sing complex songs, use tools, engage in elaborate courtship rituals, and some species even appear to have culture, behaviors that are passed down through learning rather than genetics. So the next time someone tells you that dinosaurs are extinct, you can gently correct them. Dinosaurs are all around us, singing in the trees, soaring overhead, and yes, occasionally ending up as Sunday dinner. They've been extraordinarily successful at adapting to a world that looks nothing like the one their ancestors knew, proving that sometimes the best way to survive catastrophic change is not to resist it, but to embrace it completely and become something entirely new while remaining fundamentally yourself. The age of dinosaurs never ended. It just learned to fly, and in learning to fly, it discovered that the sky was only the beginning of what was possible. Deep in the cells of every sparrow and eagle lies an ancient library written in the language of DNA, still telling the story of when dinosaurs learned to fly. For most of human history, the only way to study extinct creatures was through their fossilized remains, bones turned to stone, impressions left in ancient mud, occasionally a feather or piece of skin preserved under just the right conditions. But in the last few decades, scientists have developed an entirely new way to read the past, by examining the genetic code of living animals and looking for the evolutionary stories written in their DNA. What they've found has been nothing short of extraordinary. The genetic evidence for the dinosaur-bird connection isn't just supportive of what paleontologists suspected, it's overwhelmingly conclusive. When scientists compare the DNA of birds to that of other animals, the family relationships become crystal clear. Birds are most closely related to crocodiles and alligators, which makes perfect sense because crocodilians are the closest living relatives to dinosaurs. Together, birds and crocodiles form a group called archosaurs, and dinosaurs were archosaurs too. But the genetic story goes much deeper than simple family trees. Hidden within bird DNA are the instructions for building features that their dinosaur ancestors possessed, but that modern birds have modified or lost entirely. It's as if evolution kept the original blueprints filed away, just in case they might be useful again someday. Consider teeth, for example. Adult birds don't have teeth and haven't for millions of years. They've evolved beaks instead, which are lighter, more versatile, and better suited for flight. But bird embryos still carry the genetic instructions for building teeth. During early development, these genes are actually turned on, and tiny tooth buds begin to form in the developing beak. Then, other genes step in and shut down the tooth-building process, and the tooth buds disappear before the bird hatches. It's like starting to build a house using old plans, then remembering halfway through that you've decided to live in an apartment instead. Scientists have discovered that by carefully manipulating these genetic switches, they can coax bird embryos to develop more dinosaur-like features. In groundbreaking experiments, researchers have created chicken embryos with teeth, long bony tails, and hands with separate fingers instead of fused wing bones. These embryos don't survive to hatching. The changes are too dramatic for that. But they provide stunning visual proof of the dinosaur features that are still encoded in bird DNA. The tail experiments are particularly revealing. Modern birds have short, stubby tailbones that support their fan-shaped tail feathers. But early in development, bird embryos start to grow long, lizard-like tails with many individual vertebrae, just like their dinosaur ancestors had. Normally, a genetic program kicks in that fuses these vertebrae together and shortens the tail dramatically. But when scientists disable that program, the embryos develop long, dinosaur-like tails. The instructions for building a dinosaur tail have been sitting there in bird DNA all along, patiently waiting for over 100 million years. Even more fascinating is what happens when scientists examine the genes that control feather development. Feathers and scales are made of the same basic protein, keratin, and they develop from similar structures in the embryo. By tweaking the right genes, researchers can make bird embryos grow scales instead of feathers on parts of their body, or make reptile embryos grow primitive feather-like structures. It's as if scales and feathers are just different settings on the same basic biological machine. The genetic evidence also helps us understand the timing of dinosaur evolution in ways that fossils alone cannot. Scientists use a technique called molecular clock analysis, which compares the genetic differences between related species to estimate when they diverged from their common ancestor. These molecular clocks suggest that the major groups of modern birds began diverging from each other shortly after the Great Extinction 66 million years ago, confirming that the survivors rapidly diversified to fill the ecological niches left empty by their extinct relatives. Perhaps most remarkably, scientists have been able to extract and analyze actual proteins from some dinosaur fossils. These ancient proteins, preserved in the mineralized remains of bones, show clear similarities to the proteins found in modern birds. It's like finding a letter written in an ancient language and discovering that you can still read it because the same language is spoken today. Developmental biology has provided another window into the dinosaur-bird connection. When bird embryos are developing, they go through stages that look remarkably like their extinct relatives. Early bird embryos have the long snouts, prominent teeth, and separate finger bones of theropod dinosaurs. As development continues, the snout shortens into a beak, the teeth disappear, and the finger bones fuse together to form wing supports. It's as if each bird, during its development from egg to adult, retraces the evolutionary journey that led from dinosaur to bird. The genetic toolkit that builds a bird also contains some surprising throwbacks. Many birds still have genes for building claws on their wings, though these are usually suppressed during development. Some species, like the Hoatzin chicks we mentioned earlier, actually express these genes and use their wing claws for climbing. Other birds retain the genes for colorful display structures that their dinosaur ancestors might have used for attracting mates or intimidating rivals. Even bird behavior appears to have deep genetic roots that connect back to their dinosaur heritage. The complex songs that many birds sing are controlled by genetic programs that are remarkably similar across different species. The neural circuits that control territorial behavior, parental care, and social interactions all show patterns that suggest they've been conserved across millions of years of evolution. The respiratory system of birds provides perhaps the most compelling genetic evidence of their dinosaur ancestry. The genes that control the development of air sacs and hollow bones are unique to birds among living animals, but fossil evidence suggests that many theropod dinosaurs had similar respiratory systems. This complex genetic program couldn't have evolved twice independently. It must have been inherited from a common ancestor. Scientists have even found genetic evidence for some of the more surprising discoveries about dinosaur behavior and appearance. Genes that control aggressive territorial behavior in modern birds are similar to those found in crocodiles, suggesting that dinosaurs probably had complex social behaviors too. Genes that produce iridescent feather colors in birds are the same ones that would have created the shimmering plumage that recent research has revealed in fossilized dinosaur feathers. What's perhaps most wonderful about all this genetic evidence is how it confirms and extends the story that paleontologists have been piecing together from fossils. Every major discovery in dinosaur paleontology has been supported and illuminated by genetic research. The hollow bones, the complex respiratory system, the feathers, the parental care behaviors, all of these features that we found in dinosaur fossils are also written in the genetic code of modern birds. But the genetic evidence goes beyond just confirming what we already suspected. It's revealing new aspects of the dinosaur bird story that fossils alone could never tell us. The precise timing of evolutionary changes, the molecular mechanisms that drove major adaptations, the deep connections between seemingly unrelated features, all of this is written in the DNA of every bird singing outside your window. In a sense, every bird is a living fossil, carrying within its cells the complete genetic history of the transition from dinosaur to bird. And unlike fossils, which preserve only hard tissues and then only under perfect conditions, genetic information preserves the instructions for building every aspect of an organism, from bone structure to behavior to the tiniest cellular details. So, the next time you see a bird, remember that you're not just looking at a descendant of dinosaurs, but at a living archive of one of evolution's greatest success stories. Every cell contains the molecular memory of that incredible journey from ancient predator to modern songbird, a journey that took millions of years to complete but is retold in miniature every time an egg develops into a bird. The story of dinosaurs becoming birds isn't just written in stone, it's written in the very essence of life itself. Today, birds are the most diverse group of land vertebrates on Earth, having transformed from ground-dwelling predators into masters of every habitat from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests, proving that sometimes the best way to survive is to completely reinvent yourself. 10,000 species. Let that number settle in your mind for a moment. Over 10,000 different kinds of birds currently share our planet, from tiny bee hummingbirds that weigh less than a paperclip to massive ostriches that can outrun a racehorse. They've colonized every continent, including Antarctica. They live in deserts and rainforests, on mountaintops and ocean surfaces, in cities and wilderness areas. They've become so successful, so ubiquitous, that it's easy to forget just how extraordinary their story really is. This incredible diversity represents the flowering of an evolutionary experiment that began with small, feathered dinosaurs over 150 million years ago. Those early pioneers, just trying to stay warm and perhaps glide from tree to tree, could never have imagined what their descendants would become. But that's the beauty of evolution. It doesn't plan ahead. It simply follows possibilities wherever they lead, and sometimes those possibilities turn out to be endless. Consider the variety of ways that modern birds have learned to make a living. There are birds that plunge into the ocean at 60 miles per hour to catch fish, birds that hover motionless in front of flowers to sip nectar, birds that crack nuts with specialized beaks, and birds that follow army ants to catch the insects fleeing from the advancing horde. Some birds are living fossils, like the hoatzin with its clawed wings, while others are marvels of modern adaptation, like urban hawks that have learned to hunt pigeons between skyscrapers. The range of sizes alone tells a story of evolutionary creativity. At one extreme, the bee hummingbird of Cuba weighs just 1.6 grams and beats its wings 80 times per second, living life at a pace so frantic that it must feed almost constantly to fuel its metabolism. At the other extreme, the wandering albatross has a wingspan of over 11 feet and can glide for hours without flapping, using its enormous wings to harness ocean winds for nearly effortless flight across thousands of miles. Flight itself has been reinvented dozens of times within the bird family tree. Some birds are masters of soaring, riding thermals and wind currents with barely a wing beat. Others are aerial acrobats, capable of incredible maneuvers that would challenge the best fighter pilots. Hummingbirds can hover, fly backwards, and even fly upside down. Peregrine falcons can dive at speeds over 200 miles per hour, making them the fastest animals on the planet. Arctic terns make annual migrations from Arctic to Antarctic and back, following summer around the globe in an endless pursuit of favorable conditions. But perhaps most remarkably, some birds have chosen to give up flight entirely, returning to the terrestrial lifestyle of their distant ancestors, but bringing all the innovations of their aerial heritage with them. Penguins have turned their wings into flippers and become underwater pilots, using their flight muscles to power swimming speeds that would impress a dolphin. Ostriches and emus have traded flight for running speed, becoming flightless giants that echo the size and power of their dinosaur ancestors while maintaining the efficiency of warm-blooded metabolism. The intelligence of birds has proven to be another avenue for remarkable diversity. Crows and ravens have demonstrated problem-solving abilities that rival those of some primates, using tools, planning for future events, and even appearing to understand abstract concepts like zero. Some parrots can learn human languages with surprising comprehension, while others have been observed making their own tools and passing the techniques down to their offspring. Clark's nutcracker can remember the locations of thousands of hidden food caches scattered across mountain landscapes, demonstrating a spatial memory that surpasses most mammals. Social behaviors among birds range from the solitary to the astonishingly complex. Some species mate for life and engage in elaborate courtship rituals that can take months to complete. Others live in vast flocks that move across landscapes like feathered clouds, their movements coordinated by simple rules that create complex, beautiful patterns. Certain birds have developed cultures, learned behaviors that are passed down through generations and vary between different populations of the same species. The ecological roles that birds play are equally diverse. They are pollinators, seed dispersers, predators, scavengers, and ecosystem engineers. Hummingbirds and sunbirds have co-evolved with flowering plants, their beaks and tongues precisely adapted to specific flower shapes. Many fruit-eating birds are essential for forest regeneration, carrying seeds in their digestive systems and depositing them in new locations. Raptors help control rodent populations, while seabirds transfer nutrients from ocean to land through their droppings. Perhaps most impressive of all is how quickly birds have adapted to human-dominated landscapes. Urban birds have learned to adjust their songs to cut through city noise, shifting to higher frequencies and singing louder or at different times of day. Some species have learned to use human structures for nesting, turning skyscrapers into artificial cliffs and parking lots into substitute beaches. Others have modified their diets to take advantage of human food sources, from fast food scraps to backyard bird feeders. This adaptability reflects something fundamental about the dinosaur-to-bird transition. It created a basic body plan that was incredibly versatile. The combination of warm-blooded metabolism, lightweight bones, efficient respiratory system, and flight capability provided a platform that could be modified for almost any lifestyle. Add to that the complex behaviors made possible by relatively large brains, and you have a recipe for evolutionary success that has proven remarkably durable. The story of birds is also a story of resilience. They survived the great extinction that ended the age of giant dinosaurs, and they've survived ice ages, continental drift, climate changes, and now the massive environmental disruptions caused by human civilization. Some species have gone extinct, certainly, but the group as a whole has continued to diversify and thrive. They've proven that adaptation, not size or strength, is the key to long-term survival. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of bird evolution is how it demonstrates that transformation and continuity can coexist. Modern birds are undeniably dinosaurs, carrying forward the basic body plan and many of the behaviors of their ancient ancestors. Yet they've also become something entirely new, something that the original dinosaurs could never have imagined. They've kept what worked and changed what needed changing, maintaining their essential identity while becoming radically different. In many ways, birds represent evolution's greatest success story. They've achieved what many other groups have attempted but few have accomplished. True global dominance combined with extraordinary diversity. They've conquered every major habitat on Earth while maintaining the flexibility to continue evolving and adapting as conditions change. As you settle into sleep tonight, you might hear the evening songs of birds outside your window, descendants of dinosaurs calling to each other in voices that would have been familiar to their ancestors, yet transformed by millions of years of refinement. Those songs carry echoes of ancient forests where small dinosaurs first experimented with feathers and flight, but they also speak to the endless creativity of life, the way it finds new possibilities in old foundations and turns survival into art. The sky that once seemed empty of vertebrate life now teems with wings and songs and colors that paint the air itself. It's an inheritance earned through millions of years of adaptation, innovation, and sheer persistence. And every morning, when the dawn chorus begins and birds around the world greet another day with their voices raised in celebration, they're singing not just for themselves, but for the long journey that brought them here, for the ancestors who dreamed of flight, and for the sky that welcomed them home. And so we arrive at the end of our journey through deep time, though really, the story of dinosaurs never ended. It simply grew wings and learned to sing. We followed life's most remarkable transformation, from the mighty theropods stalking ancient forests to the tiny wren that might be nesting in your garden. We've seen how feathers began as simple warmth, how flight emerged from falling, and how a great catastrophe became an opportunity for reinvention. Through it all, we've discovered that extinction isn't always an ending. Sometimes, it's just evolution wearing a different costume. Tonight, as you settle into sleep, perhaps you'll listen differently to any birds that might be calling in the darkness outside your window. That soft cooing or distant wing beat carries an echo of something ancient, a melody that began when the world was young and dinosaurs first dreamed of sky. The next time you see a bird, whether it's a pigeon on a city street or an eagle soaring high above, you'll know you're looking at one of Earth's greatest survivors, a living reminder that life finds a way, and sometimes that way involves growing wings and refusing to be bound by the ground. And if you found any peace in this gentle expedition through time, if the wonders of evolution helped you drift toward dreams, we'd be honored if you'd join us again for more quiet journeys through science. Thanks for joining us here at Sleep Science. Sleep well and sweet dreams of flying dinosaurs.